My name is Barbara, and for nearly 3 years, Reynold and I have woven a tapestry of a happy marriage. But recently, a thread of fatigue has started to fray the edges of our relationship. You should stay in this weekend, my mom is coming over, I suggest, as I grab my keys. I'm stepping out. Reynold raises an eyebrow. Oh. So I'm to be caged while you're out? Where might you be off to, Reynold? Does it matter? It's all the same, he retorts. We usually honor our need for personal space, not prying into each other's leisure plans. But the atmosphere tenses with the impending arrival of my mother-in-law. She regards me with a cool detachment, her questions about grandchildren hanging like unwelcome fog. I yearn to dodge her scrutiny, yet Reynold seems blind to the weight of my unease. I've tried to convey how daunting one-on-one time with his mother is for me, but my words dissolve before reaching him. My mom is nothing but kind and positive, he defends. The frustration mounts, he overlooks my feelings, leaving me adrift in confusion. Despite the cordial mask his mother wears in his presence, I wish for his trust in my experiences when he's absent. Our marriage, once a vibrant title, now feels like a fading label. It stung when Reynold dismissed my plea and left, his plans unaltered. Barely had his car disappeared when the doorbell announced her arrival. I hesitated, wary of her potential commentary. Yet, with a deep breath, I resolved to face the encounter. The moment my mother-in-law crossed the threshold, she unleashed a barrage of questions. Might we expect news of a grandchild soon? She prodded. Her inquiries about our nights, our recent well-being, felt like an invasion, probing into the private corners of our lives. Each week her visits became a crescendo of stress, her obliviousness to it glaring. Her questions, relentless and accusatory, seemed to echo around me. What are you up to? You must be responsible. Children's welfare is paramount. If I leave this in your hands, might I never cradle my grandchild? Her words stung. Such a disappointing daughter-in-law, she'd say, her voice dripping with reproach. She never entertained the thought that Reynold might be the one unwilling to venture down the path of parenthood. Reynolds' avoidance of the truth was becoming a pattern, one that made me question our future as parents. He left me to navigate the choppy waters with his mother while he sought refuge elsewhere. The future loomed ominously. If a child were to come into our lives, would Reynolds' absence be a constant? Would he dismiss my calls for help with the same ease he did now? The scenario played out vividly in my mind, sowing seeds of doubt about raising a child with Reynold. Despite her pressing, I harbored no longing for motherhood, yet she persisted with her beliefs. Your body's challenges are just that, challenges, she'd insist, then swiftly pivot to critique my efforts, or lack thereof. Perhaps Reynolds' absence is a reflection of your own shortcomings, she'd imply. Her words, a blend of concern and criticism, left me standing at a crossroads, pondering the future of a family that might never be. After the door closed behind my mother-in-law, I found solace in a call to my father-in-law. I shared with him her penchant for unsolicited advice and pointed out Reynolds' conspicuous absence. His apology was sincere, laden with an understanding that only deepened my appreciation for him. Our families' histories were intertwined. His friendship with my father paved the way for my union with Reynold, a marriage that, in its inception, mirrored the arrangement of older times. My father-in-law had always been a pillar, his support unwavering, even as it might have chafed against my mother-in-law's sensibilities. Her past indiscretion, a clandestine affair, had once threatened the family's fabric, a secret unraveled by my father-in-law's discovery. They chose to remain together for their children's sake, but the fissure in their trust was beyond mending. As Reynold matured, his father made a conscious choice to keep his wife close, despite her feelings of alienation. I was often on the receiving end of her displaced frustrations, leaving me to navigate a labyrinth of discomfort. What should I do? I asked, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. He promised to intervene, to suggest she tread lightly with her words, a counsel previously unheeded by her stubborn nature. Change seemed a distant hope, and just as I felt the walls of my life draw in, fate dealt its cruelest hand. The loss of my father was a profound blow, and scarcely a month later, my father-in-law's passing left a void that mirrored the one in my heart. The grief of their dual absence was a tempest too fierce to weather alone. Despite the whirlwind of loss, the pressure from Reynold and my mother-in-law didn't wane. It began at my father's funeral, with a comment from her that sliced through the solemnity. Rumors are swirling about Barbara's father and his considerable debts, she announced, a revelation that blindsided me. My father had never mentioned any debts, and yet, Reynolds was already privy to this through her. Barbara, have you heard? Reynolds' voice cut in, laced with anticipation for his own impending inheritance. When I met his eyes, the warmth of a loving husband was absent. Instead, there was a cold calculation. A wave of regret washed over me. Marrying him felt like a grave error. My father-in-law, in his wisdom, had always been quick to chastise her. What are you implying? He would challenge. Mind your words. It was his guidance that helped me maintain composure, preventing a scene that would have marred the dignity of the funeral. But with his death, following so closely on my father's, I was left without my staunchest allies. With their passing, Reynolds and his mother's audacity grew. One morning, to my surprise, Reynolds was at home when she arrived, an unusual occurrence that suggested a covert plan. Barbara, come here, Reynolds commanded. With a sense of foreboding, I approached them, bracing myself for what was to come. Relegated to the floor as they took the couch, the power dynamics were as clear as the tension in the room. Reynolds' face was grave as he addressed me. Did your father leave a debt behind? He asked. Indeed, after my father's passing, a lawyer had come to discuss his estate. To everyone's shock, my father had accrued a debt of $2 million, a sum Reynolds had been unaware of. I won't be responsible for that debt, I stated firmly. Reynolds' questions came rapidly, tinged with suspicion. Why didn't you say anything? Are you scared I'll leave you? Were you planning to use my money to pay it off? I denied it, explaining that if I renounced the inheritance, I wouldn't inherit the debt. But before I could elaborate, they thrust divorce papers into my hands. A disappointment. A spendthrift, just like your father, Reynolds accused. I can't be with someone like that. His words cut through the air, suggesting an end to our marriage. I wanted to explain that legally, I wasn't liable for my father's debts, but the room was thick with accusations and distrust. The loss of my father and father-in-law seemed to have set the stage for this grim finale. Reynolds desired a life without what he deemed adversaries, without me. We should get a divorce, he stated, as if reading from a script. The papers were signed, and with an unsettling cheerfulness, Reynolds and my mother-in-law left, discussing plans for a celebratory dinner. The divorce, it seemed, was their preferred solution, a way to cut ties cleanly, leaving me to ponder the pieces of a life I once thought secure. In the quiet left by their departure, I began to pack up my life with the help of a friend. My belongings, imbued with memories and emotions, were sorted and boxed away. Leaving the house, their voices, light and unburdened, reached my ears. Goodbye, it's like a breath of fresh air, they said, reveling in my exit. I ignored their callous celebration and walked away without a backward glance. I informed my company of the divorce and took the opportunity to start anew, accepting a transfer to a different branch. My new beginning as a single person saw me relocated to a subsidiary far from my previous life, but with this move came a significant promotion and a salary increase. Unexpectedly, Reynolds and my mother-in-law began to contact me repeatedly, their messages filled with urgency and confusion. What's going on? Give back the money, Reynolds demanded, his message throwing me into a state of bewilderment. After regaining my composure, I pieced together the situation. It was about the inheritance. I was summoned to the reading of my late father-in-law's will, a development that puzzled me. Why was I included? I queried Reynolds for the reason behind this summons. He answered, albeit reluctantly, that the lawyer had instructed him to call me. Reynolds had been uneasy, perhaps fearing that I, his ex-wife, might be named in his father's will. The reality, however, was starkly different. Your father's $8 million inheritance goes to his former wife, the lawyer announced, leaving Reynolds and my mother-in-law dumbstruck. Their shock was palpable, a stark contrast to their earlier confidence. It seemed that the tides had turned, and the inheritance they had so eagerly anticipated was not theirs to claim after all. The attorney meeting didn't unfold as anticipated, leading to my departure. In that instant, Reynolds was overwhelmed, unable to process the turn of events, virtually paralyzed. Yet, in a matter of days, he seemed to accept that his father's estate was now legally mine, and he reached out, albeit with the naivety of a kindergartner. You're referring to which money? I questioned when he mentioned a sum. You owe me nothing. You've claimed what I expected to be my inheritance, he contested. Reynold was under the impression that as the son, the inheritance was rightfully his, especially given his mother's exclusion based on the affair. It seemed both he and possibly his mother had presumed the estate would be his. In reality, the inheritance had been designated to me. Take action, he said. Believing he would receive an inheritance, he had cleared his mortgage, but now his funds were depleted. Reynolds' hasty choices had backed him into a corner. I couldn't suppress a laugh. It's rude to laugh at your husband, he remarked. But aren't we divorced? I reminded him. We've parted ways, living separately now. His silence on the call might have been due to my accurate summation of the situation. No longer affected by his rebukes, our connection had dissolved. Today, I decided to broach an overlooked matter. Is there an outstanding payment? I inquired. When will you settle it? How should the payment be made? Confusion seems to have set in, Reynold. Remember the nightclub bill you racked up? The one I covered for you? It seems to have slipped your mind, I pointed out. I reminded him of the lavish evening he enjoyed at the nightclub, charming his date, an evening that was courtesy of his boss's invitation but ended with the $10,000 tab that I settled. I found a bitter irony in the fact that Reynold, who once sneered at my father's fiscal woes, was now ensnared in his own financial snare. He had once acknowledged the debt with gratitude, promising to clear it post-divorce. Yet, promises were all they remained. With my life regaining stability post-divorce, I sought legal counsel to recoup what was owed, but the process was paused due to the inheritance from my father-in-law. The debt, significant as it was, couldn't be brushed aside. Confronted with his obligation, Reynolds seemed bewildered. No, not at all. How about settling the $110,000 you mentioned? He retorted, his confidence misplaced. His attempt to deflect from his fiscal responsibilities by bringing up the astonishing $8 million inheritance I was due, thanks to the bond between our fathers, was a clear evasion. I remained calm yet firm. Financial distractions wouldn't make the debt vanish. The $8 million wasn't simply handed to me, it was intertwined with my father's generosity. When your father's company faced turmoil, it was my father who shouldered a $2 million debt to aid it. Despite the company's outward success, it had hit a rough patch, and my father stepped in, unbeknownst to your father-in-law, to handle the crisis discreetly. His departure was marked by a $2 million shadow of debt. My father-in-law was no stranger to the reasons behind it, having resolved to dismantle his life's work, the assets forged by the company's endurance. When I broached the subject of inheritance, I was inclined to refuse, but he was adamant, if it doesn't interest you, feel free to pass it on, just not to Reynold or his mother. That's when the veil lifted on a staggering truth. Did you always assume the inheritance was yours by default? I asked, seeking some clarity. My father-in-law had left behind an $8 million legacy, but the ties that bound Reynold to it were not of blood. Excuse me? I questioned, my curiosity piqued. How can you be so sure? The revelation came when my father-in-law, having unearthed the affair that my mother-in-law was embroiled in, discreetly commissioned a DNA test to confirm Reynolds' lineage. The results severed the presumed familial bond. Reynold was not his son, not in the biological sense. The man entangled in the affair with my mother-in-law lacked the means for child-rearing. My father-in-law, nonetheless, chose to embrace Reynold. Yet, another bombshell dropped. My father-in-law had uncovered clandestine meetings between Reynold, his mother, and the man she had an affair with, a betrayal that cut deep. Their covert exchanges laid bare a harsh truth: they had exploited my father-in-law's wealth with no regard for him. Armed with this knowledge, he decided to excise them from the will. Reynolds' reaction to my disclosure was a mix of shock and self-awareness. It dawned on him, the puzzle piece of his disinheritance finally fitting into place, my father had known all along. With that epiphany, my resolve strengthened, and I felt empowered to articulate my stance. Don't forget about the $10,000. I'll engage a lawyer to recover it if necessary, I firmly reminded Reynold. Then came his plea, hey, Barbara, can we start over? It was clear he hoped that by rekindling our relationship, he might somehow access the $8 million, even though he had no direct claim to his father's inheritance. But my feelings for Reynold had irrevocably shifted. I had no intention of exposing myself to my mother-in-law's biting criticism again. I was adamant about moving forward without hitting the reset button. With that, I terminated the call. Reynold tried to find me at work, but to no avail. The company had been forewarned and denied any knowledge of an employee under my name. Meanwhile, I was stationed at a distant branch, effectively ensuring our paths would not intersect again. Reynold and his mother were under the mistaken impression that I had quit my job due to the windfall of $8 million. Upon securing legal representation, the $110,000 was swiftly settled. It seemed he had to resort to borrowing, likely due to a lack of savings from repaying the loan. When my father's debts came to light, Reynold turned his back on me. Now, he's the one struggling financially and feeling forsaken. If only he had someone who understood him as my father did, he might have found the support he sorely needed. However, given his nature, that seemed highly unlikely. Since repaying his debt, Reynold has been living with his overbearing mother, working from sunrise to sunset to fulfill his financial responsibilities. As for me, I'm in a far-off place, planning to judiciously use the $8 million inheritance when necessary, all the while savoring a peaceful and leisurely life.